don't have to look at it, honey. You know,
I'll sit here. Yeah, that works. Thank you. What's your name again? Bruce. Thank you. I thank all of you. I really do. Hold on just a second. I've got something in this envelope. I got to see what it is.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jerry. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, Billy Bob. Some good juju. Is that the same as mojo? See, you all think I'm not hip, but I am. Juju and mojo. Bruce here reminded me how funny things can happen in AA. We were having groups down in meetings and weekend retreats like this down in Plainville years ago. And Bruce asked me if I was ever down there, and I said yeah. And he said, I thought that was you. And I said, what did I do? And he said I spilled coffee all over him, and then just had the audacity to laugh. And I tell you what, it's always interesting how our perceptions can be different. I don't remember ever laughing at anyone in the last 15 or 20 years that had coffee spilled on them. I just don't. It's just not funny. When I drop things, I sometimes it's funny to me, and sometimes it's not so funny, as Gail will tell you. But Bruce, again, I honest to God can't remember laughing at you. And if I did, I make my amends here and now. Okay. You know, there are so many great memories that we have in AA, but those memories are stories. Gail was talking over in our room just a moment ago, and she said, "Have you ever noticed how people become in AA, becoming better looking year after year after year?" And I know that may be funny to you, but she was dead serious, and I'm with her on that. I do. I think you're more beautiful today than you were, and I know what that is. I mean, I really do know it's a spirit that's inside of you, emerging. And I don't want to get too serious about this, but I want you to know that that's what happens to you. I thought my sponsor, I can't talk about my sponsor. We'll just go someplace else. But you really are beautiful to me. Does everybody here know what a Russian doll is? A Russian doll is a doll within a doll within a doll within a doll. And one of the things that makes AA what it is such a basic spiritual element that I want to share with you just real briefly what I believe it is, because what we're doing now is a part of that. I told you earlier that I looked at my sponsor when I first met him, the very first meeting. I was sitting way back in the back, and I looked at him and I thought, hell, I can't do what he does. He's naturally spiritual, and I'm not. A few weeks after that, I had begun going to whatever meeting he was at. I found out where he went from talking to others. I wasn't going to ask him, but I would ask others around him. And I said, where does Don go to meetings? They'd tell me, and then that's where I'd go. because the guy really did, he had what I wanted. And in those first few weeks after getting to know him, I watched how he treated his wife. I watched how he treated his kids. And I watched how he treated those of us in AA, and I really, truly did know I wanted what he had. And one night we were in a meeting, and I heard him tell a story. And some of you here have heard this story before. But like I say, I was still in total awe of this guy. I just thought he really was a spiritual giant. And he began to tell this story about when his two little girls, I think they were like 11 and 13, 12 and 14, someplace along in there. And they were at that age where they like to quarrel with one another, just back and forth, And one morning they were downstairs in his kitchen, and they started this. They started their routine. And he said it was going along kind of like normal, and so all of a sudden he heard the word bitch. And he said, I'm not going to have that kind of talk about my kids in my house, even if it's from one another. Both of you get to your room right now. Well, they had a two-story house, and the stairs from the upstairs was just outside the kitchen door, so they had to go out and go up the stairs. Well, it wasn't very long, and he could hear them still up there. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Bitch! Back and forth, back and forth. So he hollered up the stairs, as us fathers will do from time to time, and said, I want you to go to your rooms right now, and I want you to close those doors. And just instantaneously heard slam, slam. Each girl went to her own room, slamming the doors. Well, he started up the stairway, and his thought was, if you're going to slam them, you're not going to have them. Again, I identify. And so he got to the top of the stairs. By this time, he knew where his hammer and screwdriver was, and he started taking those doors off the hinges. Next thing you know, he's just, huffing and puffing, but he's got the doors off, got all the nuts and bolts, and he's headed down the stairs, and he turns the corner and goes around through the kitchen, down into the basement stairs. He's almost to the basement steps, and he thinks, you little fat, chubby rascal, you know what's going to happen? The same dumb fellow that took these off the hinges is going to have to carry them all the way back up there and put them on the hinges. Now, a story within a story. You see, I hear that story, and I think to myself, I can identify with him, because that's what I would do. I really would do that. And if he can do that and still appear today like he does, because by that time, in that short period of time, I really did believe he was a spiritual giant. Now, he kept trying to disabuse me of that notion for the next 15, 16 years that we were together. I will tell you, he never succeeded. He was a spiritual giant in my eyes. You know why? Because he told me the truth. But his simple act of telling me the truth about slamming some doors and him yelling at two little girls and racing down there and taking those things off the hinges, I thought, if this is what a spiritual giant looks like, I might be able to do what it is you guys do. And we've been having that kind of fun and growing and learning the truth about one another ever since. At the end of the day, any journey in this lifetime is based on the truth. Any spiritual path must first be started by recognizing truth. You recognize your truth. I recognize mine. And in the course of doing that, when we first step up and say to one another, My name's Jerry, and I am an alcoholic. There's a couple of things that occur in that simple little statement. One is, that is a tremendous act of humility for me the first time I said that. It was a humbling act. I did not want to be an alcoholic. But it was also one of the few times that I had ever told anyone the truth. First of all, I knew what the truth was. I am an alcoholic. 35 years later, that's kind of what we're celebrating here. 35 years later, I'm as much of an alcoholic today as I was back then, maybe more so. So I get in touch with my truth. I'm willing to share that truth with you all. And at the same time, have fun with it. And not ever take ourselves too seriously. And when I say to you all, you are more beautiful today than you were a year ago, and 2 years ago, and 5 years ago. You are. You really are. Except for maybe my cook way back off in the corner over there, who hasn't got the good sense yet to wear a coat on a cold day. But he says he has one. He knows what one looks like. All right, guys, I'm going to get out of the way. You've been treated to Dickie and Malcom tonight, and I'm going to shut up and let you go back to bed. Thank you for coming here. Love you.
Oh, you passed his coin around? Yeah, let's just make sure it gets back to him. Not that something so wonderful would disappear in this crowd. Somebody was going to cut up the cake, and we were going to be able to have a piece of cake as the meeting progressed here this evening. So I don't know whether we can get a volunteer out there to cut up the cake and kind of get it sent out and get it sent around so that we can celebrate Jerry's birthday and his AA anniversary together. Let me just take us for a minute to a moment of silence, and let's just clear our head and get focused on where we're going. As we reach the end of the afternoon, I began to be a little bit drained, a little bit spiritually spent as my spirit awakens and talking and sharing my experience with you guys. And I spent an hour sitting at the dinner table with 10 of you guys, having a wonderful experience, sharing some history, and looking at the book that started all with you, and sharing some Bill stories. And I felt amazingly lifted up after having the time with you, and set back on my feet. And tonight looked a little less daunting. I went and laid down for a couple of minutes and asked God for a little strength and guidance in where we're going to go tonight, knowing that Jerry's strength is ebbing and he's only got a little bit here, so Dick and I need to carry the rest of this. And you guys have been incredibly wonderful in talking to Dick and I, and giving us encouragement and sharing with us how much you've enjoyed listening to us And as Jerry likes to say, I have absolutely no idea why you would want to listen to me. But whatever gifts I have and whatever we're doing in this room came from God, came from this man, came from this man, came from all of you. And I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to share with you and grow with you and take this journey with you. I want to go back and talk just a little bit about 7th Step real quickly and move on down the highway. In the meantime, I'll give the mic to Dick if he's got any comments to share.
Well, this has been a wonderful weekend for me, and I'm equally appreciative and love all you guys. You know, you didn't have much choice but to listen to us. That's the reality of it. But you've been so kind, you know, and complimentary, and I appreciate that. I like Malcolm, like Jerry, probably like Don, I guess. It's the same thing. I don't have any idea of why anybody would want to hear our stories, but somehow what they did for me, what Jerry talked about, was really a continuum for our group, and it continues today. And that's the greatest thing of all that I can see in all this. You know, I was married 20 years, and I watched a guy get married, and I watched how he treated Gail, and I've talked about this a lot. In 20 years of marriage, my marriage wasn't bad. There were certainly some good parts about it. I loved Debbie more than I could express, even back then. It's never all bad or all good, you know. It's always some mix of that. But when I watched Jerry and Gail together, it didn't match up to what Debbie and I looked like. And like Jerry spoke, I learned from Jerry what he learned from Don. One of the things that's always of interest to me is that when we came around in 1993, it seemed to me like we had a spiritual guru in our presence. And, you know, when we really look back at this thing, he was only about a year and a half out from doing the work himself. And that, to me, was utterly amazing. Because I felt the same way as he felt with Don. And I think we all probably did. And that is, I didn't feel like I could be as spiritually fit as he could be. And then we did this. And all of a sudden, we were on the road. And the legacy continues. And I love to talk about the legacy. Just as an aside to the steps for a second. See, AA will not sustain itself if the people in this room don't step up and carry the message. It's actually conceivable to me that AA could die. It really could. And I'll be a little hard for a second and say we got a lot of people that are in the work. In the work. And that isn't the design for this thing. The design is to get through the work so that we can then give this back to somebody else. And so the legacy will continue. Jerry said, I was with Jerry and Dana in October. I love this. We're standing on his back porch looking out over the Kansas plain. And he says, Dickie, he says, see those trees out there? And I said, yep. And he goes, we're a lot like those trees. More leaves have fallen off the trees than are on the trees. God damn it, he is right. We're not going to be around forever. And so it's important that there's more people here to do this and to pass this message along so that more people can get better. I had a nice experience a couple weeks ago. One of our group. We had a young person that was in trouble. One of the things that we have a huge problem with, in my opinion, out there is that in the suburbs, we just don't have much young recovery. I can say this down in Franklin. Now, Framingham might have a little bit more because it's a little bit closer to the city, but it seems to run closer to the city. And this guy that we were going to 12-step, I got the call from his parents, and he's 24 and he's been drinking for a year, and basically he's holed up in his room, and he's going to die. And I thought to myself, I don't think he wants to listen to a 60-year-old try to tell him what the deal is. And I was able to pick up the phone and call my friend Sean, and Sean was right there. He was right there to say, yeah, Dick, I'm there. I'll get down. And he did. And he did. And that's awesome. It's just awesome. It's awesome that we've got somebody that's young, that's ready to pick this thing up and run with it. And we're going to talk about step 12 at length tomorrow. But just my little side note here is that, you know, we're depending on the people in this room to continue the legacy. And you can't do it if you haven't been through it. And if you have been through it, you may wonder, Jerry alluded to it a little earlier, you may wonder, well, why isn't my life quite the way I want it? Maybe because we're not giving away what we need to, what's been freely given to us, rather. We're not really out of self. We went through this thing and we got it, and now we're kind of back. And you know, it says right in the book, if the spiritual progress isn't forward, it's going to be where, Gerard? Backwards. That's right. So it's all important to keep the legacy of AA alive. I know Don's looking down on us tonight, and I know that would be his message. So we'll get down to the steps and get going here. Thanks.
Thanks, Dickie. In step 3, when we made a decision to turn our will over to the care of God as we understood Him, we did this step a little earlier, and we said something like, God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. It's quite an experience, by the way, sharing that all with you. Then we came along and we talked this afternoon about our 4th step, and we got down to causes and conditions, and we got down to values, and we got down to removing that which blocks us from a relationship with God. We began to talk about sharing our inventory and sharing our life story with another alcoholic and with God, and relieving ourselves of some of the bondage of self. And we arrived at steps 6 and 7 this afternoon. And in the step 7 prayer, we said something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that You should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that You now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to You and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do Your bidding. Amen. Nowhere in those 2 prayers and nowhere in our step 5, step 4 work did I see, God, please make me well because I want to be well. I see in those prayers, I see in there a request that God make me well so I can be of service to Him, so that I can go out from here and carry this message forward, so that I can be outfitted to be of maximum usefulness to another human being and to God. Arrived at step 7, I'm saying amen. I'm saying amen. And I'm saying thank You, God. And I'm preparing myself to go out from here and to right the wrongs I've done in my life. To amend is to change. To amend is to change. To set right the wrongs I've done. It's not a mumbling apology. It's not a fitful explanation for what it is I've done. It is a sincere desire to set right the wrongs I've done. Is it so that I can be well? So that I can be well? So once again, I can be relieved of the bondage of the ill feeling that I have? I think that might be the byproduct. I think that might be a net result. But I don't think it will be a net result if that's my intention and that's my motive. I sincerely believe that I need to set right the wrongs I've done so that I can make you whole. So that I can give you back the love that I've taken from you. That I can give you back the money that I've taken from you. The respect. The possessions. So I can get myself right with you so that you can be right with me. So that you can be right with me. But once again, that can't be the motive can't be about me. Can't be about me. If I approach and amend with you, and it's all about me, it's a prescription for the fact that this amend is probably not going to go quite the way I see it. I know what I've done to you, but I don't know how I've harmed you. I don't know how I've harmed you. So I have a list. I have a list we made in my fourth step. Is the list complete? Probably not complete. There are probably a few names that I need to add to it. There are probably a few names in my amends list that don't have resentments associated with them or fears associated with them, that are strictly amends over property or possessions or things of that nature. And I need to look at this list and become willing to make amends to everybody on this list. And become willing to make amends to everybody on this list. And I need to ask God for the guidance and prepare myself to go out from here and to make those amends. Can I share for a moment?
So in step 8, I have my list, as Malcolm said, from the fourth step. And this is where sponsorship comes in handy. Because even though I'm a bit well compared to where I was, I often don't know the true from the false as far as what my amends should look like. So as I get down through the list with my sponsor, I get to do that double check, and I get to see some truth, hopefully. And I'll share a little story with you. We were at Jerry's 1994. It would be in the fall. And Dawn was there for a retreat. We had about 100 people in the house. And the worst possible thing that could have happened. The kitchen drain let go. You know, you had all these drunks in there washing dishes, and you know, it was a high time. It was a big party, and it was busy. And so I said to Elkins, let's go down to Home Depot and we'll get the pipe and we'll put it back together. And so on the way down, I said to him, you know, I've got a couple of amends I want to talk to you about. I had two that I wanted to speak to him about. I said one was a large medical institution in Boston, and the other was a gentleman that I had worked with. And I felt that I owed the amends to the large medical institution, but not to the gentleman that I fired. And so in a very patient way, he said to me, well, tell me about it. And so I did. And what happened was back in the 80s, when I was at the height of my alcoholism, I repaired medical equipment, and we got some old medical equipment taken out of service in the hospital, and it was put down in the sub-basement. And I had a good relationship with the pipe shop of this particular institution, and in that I was close to one gentleman. And so we agreed that we would fix this piece of equipment up, and that I would take it and sell it to another hospital. And he liked that idea, and I did too. I remember he said to me one time, he said, Dick, you know, there's 3 ways to go here. He said, you can work for the system, you can work with the system, or you can make the system work for you. And, you know, I subscribed to that. That's how I ran my life. Make the system work for you. And that's what we did. So I took parts that I had sold them that were in that hospital's inventory and took them downstairs, and on their time, I rebuilt this machine, cleaned it and polished it all up, got my father-in-law's pickup truck, backed it up to the loading dock, and off it went to another hospital. We sold it for $2,500, which in those days was a pile of cash. And so now I'm on the spiritual path, and this one's nagging at me pretty big. Ironically enough, I had gone to work for the furniture company, and guess where one of my accounts was? It was at this major medical institution. And my responsibility was to sell them product. So I thought, well, you know, I owe this hospital an amends, a financial amends, and I want to make it right. And I'm ready to do it. I'm going to go tell the fellow, the director, what I did. And Jerry stopped me and he says, "Well, wait a minute. Let's think about this a little bit." He says, "What's your job, Dick?" And I said, "Well, you know, I work for the Office Pavilion in Boston." And he said, "And what do they pay you to do?" And I said, "Well, they pay me to sell furniture." And he said, "Okay." And he said, "And you got a family, and you need to support that family." And he said, "What about the people that were involved?" See, the guy that was involved, I promoted up a little bit and then ended up in sales. And the guy that was involved actually now is in administration. He was in facilities management. He said, "What do you think would happen to him if you blew the lid off this thing?" I didn't think about that. So we said, "Well, maybe it's time to look at that amends and study it and maybe think about another approach." And my response was, "Well, how about if I give him the $2,500 anonymously?" That won't do. That won't do. So what he explained to me lovingly and patiently was that I had to be willing to make that amends. See, that's what it says in the step. I have to be willing. If I look at the amends process, as Malcom said, and I'm not capable of looking at it, if I look at it with my sponsor, I have to understand how it's going to affect others. I had another lady, back in the 60s, I fought pretty hard to get her bra off. That was another one. Now, think about how would that work if I went back into her life. I could probably find her. But it probably wouldn't go very good if I went and made amends for trying to take advantage of her. Those are a couple of examples of why I need a sponsor and my list in the 8th step to go about my amends. Like Malcom said, see, the word amend means to change. And I don't know how I affect others. I had another situation with my daughter. I went to 9th step my daughter. And I said to her, I did what I was told. The dialogue went like this: "Jess, I don't know how I've affected you. I know I've affected you, but I don't know what I've done to you. Can you tell me?" She said, "Dad, you abandoned me." I was shocked. I said, "How did I abandon you?" She said, "When you were drinking, you were here every night. But once you started to go to AA, you weren't around. You left me. You could have blown me over." The thing is that I don't know how I affect other people. And I didn't know from my own daughter. So I have to be willing to put it out there the way I think it is, and then be quiet enough to hear how I've affected them, no matter what the situation. And then ask them what I can do to make it right. Now, what I could do to make it right in that case was just to be there, I think. That's what she told me. "You can be here for me, Dad." We talk about a living amends. A living amends is an amends over time to try to correct the wrongdoing that we've done as in our wreckage. So I have a living amends to Deb. And that living amends is every day I try to be the best husband that I can be. I don't always hit it. She might tell you I don't hit it much at all. I don't know. But I try. I try to. And we have a pretty cool relationship these days. We don't fight all that much anymore. Jerry told me that him and Gail, even though it sounded cliche, they were spirits walking together side by side. I'm losing my original thought here. It'll come back to me, but kindred spirits. Sounds a little cliche maybe, but I understand it now. I really do. I think that there's nothing like marriage in recovery, at least in my experience. If we're truly trying to be of service to the other person, and in the amends, we can do that. We can really, truly try to change who we are to the best of our ability. Not perfectly. Not perfectly. So, those are some of the guidelines and some of the ideas that I was given, as far as trying to make an amends. It's not for us. The book says it. We're here to sweep off our side of the street, never to criticize. And it's the amends process is really the first selfless act that we do in recovery. If you think about the first 7 steps, they're all about us. I'm trying to not manage my life. I'm trying to get a God of my understanding to relieve me from insanity. I'm turning my will and my life over to God. I'm looking at my personal inventory. God gets in there in 6 and 7, and then we're really, the deal really is from there on, we're really out to try to be of service to others. And the amends is the first act of selflessness.
So well. I'm serious. First of all, I can't talk to people at my back. So, no, that's all right. Hell, they'd probably like it if I would. I really don't know how I can add to that. I can't tell you how many times I've had this thought that I really truly believed when I was a young man that I was remarkably good to other people. I honest to God, I had that as a belief. And I remember finishing that first inventory and getting down to the 4th column, and I just see the same thing over and over and over again, and I was extremely self-centered, extremely selfish. And I really truly believe that I was not. And so the idea that I'm going to have to go back in my life and clean that up with people, I can't tell you how many elderly people in my lifetime up until I went through this process had been very, very good to me. But I didn't treat them as though they'd been good to me. I used them for what I could get and then went on. And as I began to see that and see it so clearly, I really didn't like myself. I didn't feel good that the inventory was over. And so the idea that I can sit down, make a list of those people, and I go out and try to clean that up with them, even though there's nothing in it for me, as Malcom just said so clearly. There's not going to be anything for me, at least I don't think there is, in going through this amends process. So I sit down, and I'm going to sneak ahead just a tiny little bit. I made this list, and I called Don. We went over it, and I had some real surprises and some things that he saw that I didn't, but we got that squared away. And so I began to go out and make amends immediately. Now, because I'm a guy who drags his feet, remember this was early in 1990, February, March of 1990. I was broke as broke could be. I didn't have a job, didn't have any prospects for a job. I was living in Denver. My son lived with me, and I just wasn't sure that there was any way I could go out and make any amends. And Don said, well, you need to start. And I'm a guy that if I don't start something immediately, it will linger in my head, and it'll just get progressively harder the longer I think about it. And so I did the fifth step with him on a certain day. The very next day, I sat there and pondered step 6 for just a little while, then went immediately into 7, and toward the tail end of that second day, I started my amends list. And I got up the next morning, and I finished my amends list, and I started immediately to go where I could to make amends that were on that list. Those that were somehow there that I could. And as I look back on that today, I've always been grateful that I had. I had a sponsor that wasn't particularly fancy about this, about the big book or the steps and how you do this, and you got to get it just perfect. I remember one time I said, Don, I don't think I'm going to get this right, and he said, you aren't. And I thought, Jesus, you don't have to be that brutal. Having a great sponsor is absolutely they will make so much fun of you and have a wonderful time doing it. And I do that with people I sponsor. Don't think I don't. I try to cover it up with kindness, but I'm having a good time. Anyway, Don says, you won't do it right. They said you won't do it wrong either. He said, the only thing it'll ever get in your way is if you don't do it at all. And I've remembered that until now. The only trouble any of us can get into is if we just don't do it at all. So I remember that was the first time I've ever done anything in my life immediately. I've always found some excuse to not do it now. I'll do it tomorrow or when I feel better. Let me think about this for a little bit. I love to think about it. So anyway, I finished that list on Thursday morning, and I remember going down through that list and saying, okay, which ones could I make here and now? If any one thing about the spiritual life will come to you is that everything involved has to do with the here and the now. Here, you and I are okay. And now, you and I are okay. Or you can say it another way. Right here and right now, none of us are okay, but that is okay. I mean, we're just what we are, right? But if you were to ask me right here and right now, Jerry, are you at peace? I would say absolutely. Do I want anything at this moment that I don't have? Maybe a slightly less tumultuous stomach. But other than that, I have what I want here and now. So everything we're talking about is here and now. That's just I throw these little sidebars in. I don't charge extra for them. It's all in good fun. But I appreciate these guys letting me throw in something. I did not love the amends process. Let me make that very clear. And I try to at least once every time I'm involved in a weekend is to let the people that are here know one thing. When you're sitting up here talking and you've been doing this for 20 years, it all sounds like it's so very easy. We just sailed right through it. It was just, And most of us did this in fits and starts. I tell you what, I threw my big book across the room. God and I had some wonderful swearing matches. The language was just horrible. I quit several times. I had a 16-year-old son. He was living with me at the time. And I said one day to him, I says, I'm quitting. He says, Dad, why would you quit? I says, 'Cause I am. I'm just quitting. He says, you can't quit. I said, what do you mean I can't quit? He says, you don't know how this is going to turn out because you haven't done it yet. Where did he get so goddamn wise? I truly believe that God drops little angels in our path as we're trying to do this stuff. Okay? I really truly believe that. That son and I have had a wonderful time. He called me here just a little while ago, and I missed the call, but I'm going to go back to the room and call him shortly. And what a wonderful time, wonderful place for me to be able to be in a spot to talk to him. So, if you find yourself struggling, just know that the rest of us ahead of you, we struggle too. This was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. The first time through, and once I got through it the very first time, I thought, why did I make that so hard? It's just a life or death matter. Why did I make it so hard? It's the easy stuff that has very little importance in my life that I do right away. The hard stuff, the stuff that's life or death, I procrastinate because it's hard. I don't want to do something if it's hard. Always, just think about that. But let me add one little thought to the tail end. Anytime you find yourself dragging your feet just a little bit, we can always pray for the strength to go on. And I guarantee you it will come, and you may not even recognize it when it comes. You'll just find yourself trucking through this, won't you, Bobby? Yeah.
Let me share a couple of thoughts on the practical side. My experience with getting my amends done was very much as Jerry talked about, fits and starts. I consider myself an alcoholic of the utterly and completely insane and hopeless variety. And if I've struggled with anything, it's intellectual dishonesty. And that manifests itself in a variety of ways. But one of the ways it manifests itself is, as we spoke earlier, if I met you, I messed with you. As Jerry and Dick have shared, that comes from Don. So at some level in my head, I am so important that I owe everybody I have ever met an amend. So I can get this list to be the most unimaginably large, all-consuming list of people. And by the time I was at this stage of trying to get this done, I was too afraid to talk to Jerry. And he had rushed off to Denver, I think, at that point when he left Cumberland. And I was adrift. I was very much adrift. And I was kind of using all of you as my sponsor. As Dick shared with you, I always had a gig going. And for a while there, on Monday night, it was the PIP shelter in Maine South and Worcester. And on Wednesday nights, it was Framingham and Saxonville. And Saturday nights, it was Spectrum House. And I immersed myself so deeply in this that I paid some lip service to some of this stuff. And as I said, got it done in fits and starts. And in working with others and finally bringing some people along to making some amends, it motivated me to get more amends done as time passed. And when I share these stories with some of my guys, I encourage them not to do what I did. And I also encourage them to begin with the amend that they want to do the least. Okay? That amend tends to be the amend that I am most terrified of. And it's the amend that may have kept me from doing any of my work for a long time. It's the amend that back when I was at the beginning of this, I may have said, I am never going to go to that person, and I am never going to say that I'm sorry. And the conclusion was, I am never going to start this work because I am never going to do that amends. So, my mind would go straight to the worst possible consequences of this entire process, and it was, see you later. This is not for me. As Jerry said, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't be like you. Well, the Spirit moved me, and Jerry moved me, and all of you guys moved me. And sharing my experience with all of you, I needed to do more, and I needed to do more. And as the years have come up and dropped off and come up and dropped off, and so many times reading this book have come up and dropped off, I've completed an awful lot of those amends. An awful lot of them have been living amends and living changes. An awful lot of them have been family members who said you didn't have to do anything, that it's enough that you're sober and you're doing the right things. And I needed to decide what it is that I needed to do for those people. And I talked some about that, and my mother, and I talked some about what I needed to do late in her life for amends to her. And there were things in her life that I needed to take over and be in charge of and get handled for her. And that was part of my amends to her. I took myself out of her will, which was part of my amends to my brother and my sister, because I had abused my mother and her money and my family for so many years in so many ways that the only way I could repay them was to not be part of the problem when she died. So amends come in an awful lot of different forms and different ways and different manners. Some of them, as Jerry and Dick have shared, it was very humbling and very difficult. In sobriety, I lived in Newton, and I lived on the second floor of 34 Winchester Road, and the guy downstairs was a Snap-on dealer. And he had a little garage at the end of the driveway, and he would trade in these tools. And he didn't spend any time or energy and effort on these tools, and the garage wound up being full of tools that he'd traded in, and boxes and things. And being a good alcoholic, I thought that those were available for me to use and take and populate my toolbox with. And one of my very, very difficult amends, since this happened in sobriety, was to go and search him out. And he was no longer a Snap-on dealer. And I had all of these tools that I was going to give him back. And he didn't want to take a single thing. And he didn't want to take a single thing. But it was deeply humbling to walk into his garage one day and say, listen, I just want to share with you, I lived upstairs from you for all these years, Aaron, and I'm nothing but a petty thief. And I'm nothing but a petty thief. I think maybe it's time that we can hear from you guys, and you could share a couple of experiences with us. We got about 10 or 15 minutes left in this session. And then we'll take a break and move across the street. And I see that Sean was very, very quick with his hand over there in the back.
Alcoholic addict Sean. And doing this amends process, I knew that I had to do a living amends for my family. But there was something more when I was going through this process. I felt it inside, the Spirit, and I had to sit down with my parents, and I had to say, I'm sorry. And they says, you said it a million times. I says, I know. And I started to cry, and it was heartfelt, and they says, what can I do for my living in amends? They says, well, you keep doing what you're doing, so your little brother sees you doing that, and he follows you in the steps that you're taking. My brother was going down the wrong path. I don't know if I had helped or not, but he hasn't used or done drugs in 3 weeks now. He's 18. He doesn't go to meetings right now, but if that's what he's doing right now and he's not for right now, that's okay. Also, my father's in the program, and I don't go to meetings that talk about family and bash at my door. I never will. My father's a great man. He was dealt a life of hell. And I overheard him giving amends one time, and I was on my knees bawling He called my half sister, and he found her at college. He found her, and this guy lied his whole life. And to think that he could do this, and I watched him do this and make this amends, that was so heartbreaking for him. And to hear someone on the other line say she wants nothing to do with you, but he had to do it to move forward in his life, I said, I could do this. You know what I mean? And it gave me hope. And you know, it's just an amazing process for me. You know, I still have some amends to make. You know, I got an old football coach I got to see. You know, I'm still willing to make it. I'm getting the guts soon, but that's it.
Hey, come get to you, Brenda.
My name is Brenda, and I'm an alcoholic. And I love this step. This step literally changed my life. I did the steps a little bit differently. I did them the way that we did them where I'm from is a little bit more structured. So in order to speak at the meeting, you have to do a few amends. So, and you have to do, you know, your resentment, your full fourth step. There's no, you know, taking apart and doing it later with this, and which is fine. Anyways, not here to judge. My experience with this step is that I was asked to make a list. And I made the list. I called up my sponsor. She came over. I handed it to her. There were about 5 names on it. She threw it back at me, and she said, let's sit down. And we went through my writing, and she added on to it about, I don't know, many more names. And but we did it column by column. We did it ready and willing, ready not willing, no never, and then financial. Well, I did probably, I think I had to make 3 amends before I could speak at a meeting. I did 3 on the ready and willing, the easiest ones that I knew wouldn't hurt, and then everybody else was no never, and then I think I had like 2 financials. And so I did the 3. I started speaking, and it, you know, I was on that, you know, little high for a while, but because nothing changed, because I stopped growing, because I no longer was working the ladder steps. You got to keep moving in this process. You know, I was blocked. You know, I put my hand up at the meeting. Nobody's asking me to sponsor them, which I was grateful for because I was still filled with fear. And my sponsor was saying, you know, how are those amends coming? How are those amends coming? And I would just look at that no never column and say, no never. And so I wound up having to get another sponsor, because that sponsor no longer wanted to work with me. And I found somebody who was a little bit softer and gentler, and she said, forget the columns, just put them in a list and go down them. And so I started praying for the willingness to do them, and it was amazing. Like, the people just started popping up out of the sky and like in front of me, and I was like, oh. And I got to that one that I said, no, never, no, really, never will I ever do this person. It was my cousin, who was really, really, really close to me. She was like my sister. And in my 4th step, I had seen wrongs that I had done her that I didn't even know I had done. So I knew I had owed her an amends. And I called her. I called her 3 days in a row, because I knew I couldn't move forward unless I did this amends. And I called her 3 days in a row, and my sponsor told me, you know, you haven't been able to contact her, so let's leave it alone for a while, but still remain willing. The next day, I'm at the grocery store, and she's in the grocery store. And I'm like, oh my God, and I panicked, and I walked away. Then within a few days, I'm back in the grocery store, she's there. And I walked up to her, and I commented on her grandchild, and I walked away. And then within a week later, I'm rounding the corner at the grocery store. This is the same grocery store, and she meets me. And I start to walk away, and I said, I can't. So I went to her, and I said, I'd like to make an appointment to make an amends with you. And she turned around, and she said, She put her hand up. She said, I have forgiven you. I've accepted you for who you are, and I don't want you in my life. And that was so freeing to me. I haven't seen her since. Well, I haven't seen her since. There hasn't been any corner, at the grocery store, and she hasn't been there. God provided for me what I couldn't do for myself. He provided her. I tried, and I had to respect that. And that changed my life. That changed my life because in doing those amends opened me up to my, the sunlight of my spirit. And all of a sudden I started being able to help others, because I was blocked because I wasn't getting rid of that crap of, I wasn't righting the wrongs I had done. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic. And for my amends, I found that I am such a people pleaser, and I am so afraid of upsetting someone that if I'm making amends and I'm looking at you and it's not going well, I'm going to start doing a U-turn. So what I did for me that really helped me is I wrote out my amends. And I typed them up, and I slid the typewritten piece of paper over to the other person because I knew for me I wouldn't be able to take anything back. That it was right there. I was able to think it out ahead of time, and it was there for me so that I could be really honest with the person. And for me, most of my amends went really well. There was lots of hugging, and people telling me they love me. But there were a couple of amends that were different than that. I made an amends to my first wife, who I was physically abusive to. And when I made that amends, I never believed what she said to me. She said to me, I always thought it was my fault. And I could not imagine me being abusive. Somebody would think that they deserved it or that it was their fault. And it was just heartbreaking that, that this person, 20 years later, believed that. And, and I just, we had been, this was my first wife, and we had remained friends for a long time after our relationship ended. And the other amends that was really important to me is I had written a letter to somebody and, saying that I had hurt them and I was making amends, and they wrote back to me, yes, you did hurt me. And I really had to be conscious that, with all the hugs and loving, and thank God you're sober, that, I really did hurt people. I had to be really aware of it. So oftentimes I believe that alcoholics are perceived as people that can use the alcoholism as a disease excuse and say, sorry, I have a disease. And I remember that happened at work once. They were getting ready to fire a woman, and she said she was an alcoholic, and they stopped the firing process and sent her to rehab. And one of my coworkers, who's a close friend, said, there you go. Just all you have to do is say you're an alcoholic and you get away with everything. And the truth is, I think this is what makes it all different, is for us to actually go back, a real alcoholic going back and making amends is what's different than just saying, sorry, I have a disease and making excuses. This is what makes a difference, and this is where the miracle happened for me. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Tony. I'm an alcoholic. I am really, really, really nervous, but I'm going to share something with you which means a lot to me. I grew up without a father. I've always felt really abandoned by him. I was really angry because of that. I drank. I remember drinking. I wanted to stuff those feelings that I had because he was never there, and I was so angry because of that. A lot of people pay for that price because I was so upset. A couple months ago, I got the opportunity to meet him. He flew me to Aruba, and I was really nervous. And I was sitting across from him, and I can see the pain that he was carrying all his life in his heart, and he told me that, and I can see the shame that he carried, and I can see that, and the light went on in my head, and it says, I'm here for him. It wasn't about me, and I says, Dad, it's okay. And today he calls me, and we have a really good relationship that we never had. But he says we begin a new beginning today. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. We go forward from now, And that was the gift, that I felt that spirit tell me that. See, it wasn't when I was flying there. I felt like he needed to make amends to me, and it wasn't about that. It was me relieving, and that's what AA has given me. It's given me maturity. It's given me it's given me back who I am supposed to be through maturity, because I was so immature when I was drinking, even in sobriety. And that's what this program has given me, to become the man that I'm supposed to be, you know. And that was the coolest thing I've ever felt. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Michelle, alcoholic and the addict. Hello, everybody. It's me again. The first thing I'd like to say is I met my partner and my soulmate, Bob Jones here, and moved in with him in Cumberland, Rhode Island. And this is where I heard about this very important man named Jerry. And I was like, who is this guy? I thought there wasn't supposed to be anybody in this program that's better than anybody else. You know, all I kept hearing was Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And I was like, and I finally got a chance to meet him. And he's no different than anybody else, I said. And I was so happy now. I felt that way. And I understood what people were talking about. It was kind of the first glance I really got, feeling like everybody else in the halls. Back to amends, another like Jerry thing. I had to do something immediately, as soon as I got to the step. First, I had to rush over to my parents. Very, very first thing. It was after a step meeting, and we were on this step, and I said, I got to get there before my parents start their 9 o'clock movie. So I got to get there plenty of time to do this, so I drove about 80 miles an hour, which I shouldn't have, but oh well, I did. And anyways, I got there, and I sat down, and I sat silently, which was one of the most difficult things I had to learn to do. And I says, Mom, Dad, could you please shut the television off for me before your movie starts? And they said yes. And I says, I'm here, Mom and Dad. I said, for once again abandoning the family. And they said, Michelle, we've already forgiven you for that. You know that. I said, but that's not it. That's not all of it. And I continued the rest of my amends that I needed to make. And they said, Michelle, we have forgiven you. And I needed to do that for some reason real fast, because I always remembered that you get hit by a bus tomorrow. And I thought that was going to happen to me, so I had to do that quick. And then the rest of them weren't so easy. So I'm still working on them. But I just love how they forgave me like that. And I have had people that haven't accepted it too, and that's okay. I didn't walk away resentful or angry. I felt better that I had done that for them, not for me, that I was able to say my wrong in our relationship. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Brian. I'm an alcoholic. You know, I was thinking about my first amend that I had made. I was about 3 weeks sober, and I hadn't done the previous 8 steps. And I was driving home with my mother, and I says, Mom, I owe you an apology. And I proceeded to tell her every single thing that I had done. And with that, I proceeded to absolutely horrify my poor mother. But that's what we do when we do this process, But well, that's what I did, I should say. But and hopefully I can tie this all together. But one of my resentments was with my father, and I had never even met my father, and I had a resentment. And the resentment was that he was never there. He was never there for me. I never had him. He left. And people used to tell me, and don't ever tell an alcoholic that they have the right to be angry, but people used to tell me that I had the right to be angry about that. And it probably fueled that resentment for a long time. But when I finally got to doing some real inventory on it, I found out that I wasn't, and I had met him. I had met him previously to doing the inventory. Finally, I realized in my inventory that I wasn't there for him, and I wasn't allowing him to be my father once we did meet. So there was no chance that he could have done anything anyways, So when it came time to do my amends to him, with good direction from my sponsor, because I probably wouldn't have thought about it this way, but he said you need to let him off the hook. You need to let him off the hook. And I wasn't expecting an amend from him, and I wasn't expecting an apology for him, because I had finally seen in my inventory that I had a part in that. I had a play in there, and when I made my amends to him, and I says, I just want to. Part of my amend is just being a son to him and letting him be my father, on whatever terms that may be, and they're not my terms anymore, and ever since that day we've had a father and son relationship, and I can call him up and I can ask him how he's doing, and I can be a son to him, and I really don't need anything from him anymore, and I don't want anything from him anymore, and I am human. I am having a human experience. I just don't need him to be my father. I don't need direction. I don't need all those things that I thought I needed before from him. But I'm able to do those things for him. And that's, to me, that's the difference between doing the steps and not doing the steps. I didn't have to horrify him with all my stories. Thanks.
And bring this to an end here. So we'll grab Mike back there, and we'll grab Eddie. I'm sorry.
Mike, alcoholic. There was an amends that was on my mind when I first walked into the rooms. I knew I owed my ex-wife an amends, and it prevented me from doing a lot of things because I was just afraid of it. And I had a conversation with someone in this room 3 years ago. Hold it lower. Hold it higher. About 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just sort of drilled into my head that I have to be willing to do it. So anyway, when I got to this step and I went to make that amends to her, I was prepared for the worst. And this woman does not like me, and I've done her a lot of harm. And I went to her and I told her I had wronged her, and she absolutely agreed with me, and proceeded to tell me a lot of terrible things, and really took it as an opportunity to really sort of attack me. And I just kind of sat there and let her share her experience. And I asked her what I could do to make it right, and what could I do to make it up to her. And she proceeded to give me a list of things that she expected me to do. And I remember, as part of that conversation that I had a few years back, was, I can't do something that I can't do. I have to do this. So I don't have to agree to all of the wish list. So I was able to tell her in a calm way. It's like, well, I can't do that, but I can do this. And it went okay. And then it's not beautiful, but the irony of it was that a woman that I didn't have a relationship for a very long time, we had a small window of a relationship. And 2 weeks later, her father died. And I was the first one she called. And because I work from home, I was able to leave my house. I was able to go right over there. I was able to be there for her and my children. It was a very chaotic scene. There was a lot of alcohol around. I was completely safe. But it was just something that I had never anticipated. I just didn't see it. Unfortunately, that relationship is not better, but for that moment it was. For that short little period of 3 to 4 weeks, it was better. And that event had happened in that period. And it's just one of those things. So thanks.
Ed, alcoholic, drug addict. I had one really deeply painful amends to my mom, who, when I was on my last really bloody, ugly run, my mother was riddled with arthritis and living with one of my sisters. She was home alone in the daytime, and I knew that she needed a life alert. But I was on a vicious run. Didn't get the life alert, and she took a spill. And nothing was ever the same. And she ended up being in a nursing home with dementia, very rarely knew who anyone was anymore, thought I was my father. And I come from a long, messy, ugly, drunken Irish mess, and my father died alcoholically, so it was already difficult with that part, still. And I finally got to my bottom, surrendered, and was in a halfway house, and like 52-year-old man with a family in a halfway house, and my mother died. And so it was a I knew about the steps. I hadn't done them, but it was a AWOL house, and so I wrote a long letter and left it in her casket. They would only let me go to either the wake or the funeral. I went to the wake, and I left a letter in her casket. But afterwards, with my sponsor, doing this process, I told him how much it would still bothered me, and I wrote a long, heartfelt letter, left it at her grave, and I visit her every year, and I can only hope at this time now, never having had the chance to really make it right while she was alive, that she can see that I'm doing the best I can now. But to leave it unsaid, I promised her my whole life that I would never turn into my father, and then I left him in my dust.
Thanks,
it is what it is.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for the story. And we'll talk a little bit about graveside amends and things of that nature after the break. We've been here for an hour and 15 minutes, and it's time for a pee break and a cigarette break, and we're out of CD, and I know Jerry's got to put his head down, so I'm not so sure we're going to have him for the last session, but it's been awesome to have him here and get a few comments from him. So we're wrapped up here in the volunteer fire department. We'll meet over at the other building in 15-20 minutes, and we're done in here. Thank you.